Do what thou will be the whole piece of law.
Hello, my friends. This is Worm Speaker speaking. Today is August 28th, 2026, and this is my bi-weekly audio letter number 62. Now, you may know that in our world of ours, a lot of things have been happening recently that probably have you concerned and puzzled. Things like the rise of artificial intelligence, the passing away of multiple celebrities, and the rise and proliferation of flock cameras. And all of these are important, but that is not what we will cover today. But what I hope to do in my bi-weekly letters to you is to try and focus your attention squarely on the most basic developments. Understanding Dr. Peter Beater in the most basic matters will, I believe, enable you increasingly to grasp the significance of the details of him yourself. And once the American public can see through the daily diet of clever, subtle propaganda, which is served up by the major media as news, when it is really not news at all, then the jig will be up for those who are trying to take our country and our freedom away from us. In this audio letter, I therefore want to discuss three important topics. Number 1, who was Dr. Peter Beater? Number 2, the true happenings of 1975 to 1982 when his audio letters were written. And number 3, the modern day applications of such information. Okay, I gotta stop. It was good for the intro, but I'm not doing that the entire time. If you expected me to do it the entire time, I'm very sorry. I'm not doing the FDR accent the entire time, but I will try and keep it a bit smoother and more purposeful in the spirit of Dr. Beater. So, topic number 1. Who was Dr. Peter Beater? Well, you may know him for a couple things, although I'm going to give a brief overview of his life and probably skip over some important things. The overview of his life will be brief. He was born in Huntington, West Virginia, born to 2 Lebanese immigrants who would start up their own grocery store after coming to the United States. He would then get his law degree from George Washington University in Northern Virginia. He would then proceed to become an attorney. It's still, the accent's still seeping into my, okay, you're gonna have to forgive me if the accent keeps slipping in. I'm trying to get rid of it, but I might have just gotten stuck into it, oh no. In this lawyering work, he would be most well known for 2 legal cases, one being Farley versus United States, and the other being England versus United States, not England the country, England as in someone's last name was England, but he also represented what is now known as the Gold Prospectors Association of America. After his representation there, ending in 1961, he was appointed by President John F. Kennedy to the Import-Export Bank of the United States, the 3rd largest bank at the time, and his love of gold would not hinder him, as he would also set up mining operations in Zaire and be responsible for an Argentinian oil line representing United States interests. During this time, he would also run as governor of West Virginia in 1968 as a Republican, although he was stated as a Democrat, which was a little bit of a surprise, but he lost in the primaries to a more qualified candidate, Arch A. Moore Jr. Now, this switch was not unpredictable, as he was a supporter of George Wallace, the man whose most famous quote was "Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever," and he would not give up on supporting him politically. However, after this, 5 years later, he would publish a book called Conspiracy Against the Dollar, The Spirit of New Imperialism, which would be a little bit of a shadow of what's to come, talking about mainly economics, which will be in number 3 of this audio letter, alleging that world events were controlled by people that you'll see in the coming section. But the reason why his audio letters span until 1982 is because he would suffer a heart attack in those years. Now, this heart attack would cause him to focus on the more important things in life, namely not trying to expose global conspiracies, but instead spending time with his family. And he would pass away peacefully in 1987 while surrounded by family. Now that I've given you the basics of Dr. Peter Beater's life. Beater. It can't be there has to be at least one Family Guy joke. Now that I've given you the basics of his life, I should give you the basics of his beliefs as well. That will lead us into section 2 of this audio letter, beginning strongly that Nelson Rockefeller desires the presidency of the United States to bring about the new Constitution to bring dictatorship to the United States. Now, if you don't know, Nelson Rockefeller is the vice president to President Gerald Ford, and President Gerald Ford at the time was an interim president until a better candidate could be chosen. At least that's my personal view. And with this, Nelson Rockefeller gaining control of the United States would institute a world constitution and bring about a new world order. Now, another thing, being affiliated with the gold prospectors of America and having his own mining operations and being very connected to the gold industry, would be concerned in his early audio letters about something called the Fort Knox gold scandal, meant to be an economic shock to the United States and an instrument of the Rockefellers, who are manipulating unemployment, inflation, shortages, and the stock market to seize power through a United States federal operation called Operation Garden Plot. Now, what you need to understand as we go into this is Dr. Beater would not be your typical type of conspiracy nutcase. In the likes of your Francis E. Deck or Norma Cox's, you can see their insanity pile on over time, and as you listen to his audio letters, you get the sense that he is becoming more and more urgent as he continues on. However, he is still very calm and collected throughout the entirety of his audio letters and does not break out into ranting of any kind. He is very concise. He supports his ideas with believable evidence, rather than what you've seen so far on my audio letters being the deranged ravings of people who see world events and chalk it up to something unseen. Now, Dr. Peter Beater has his fair share of the unseen. However, that does not let it hinder him in his analysis, which you will see in the coming section, number 3, that it still has many applicable sides to it in the modern day, as well as being competent and sometimes right. Now, he will fixate on the Fort Knox gold scandal for a while, and he will assert that the multi-layered vault has instead become 2 vaults, pointing out that the last audit by the books was done in 1954, by time of writing almost 20 years ago, and continually they have found ways to get around annual audits, and he was one of the only reasons that a full audit was done back in 1970, which, to my knowledge, has been the greatest and most well-done audit of the Fort Knox gold since. He would also begin to assert that the CIA, under certain conditions, can program people like robots. Now, I don't have to give you a poor reading of Dr. Peter Beater's writings, even though I am doing a poor impression throughout this entire video, as I have tried to avoid, but seems to have become unavoidable. So feel free to listen to this horrible Texas accent through the rest of the video, because I can't free myself from it. I don't have to give you a poor reading of Dr. Peter Beater's writings, as he can tell you himself, as the audio in audio letter will allow him to tell you about the Robotoids himself. So, here's Dr. Peter Beater explaining his Robotoids.
True clones are not involved, but something that bears a superficial resemblance to cloning is going on. And the last thing the powers that be want is for you and the public to have any hint about what is afoot. In Russia, as well as in the West, research has been underway for many years in biological synthesis, that is, artificial life forms. And according to high intelligence, a stunning breakthrough took place in Russia some years ago. The Russians refer to this breakthrough as a providential discovery, something they learned almost by accident. They discovered the key to creating what are known as organic robotoids. An organic robotoid is an artificial robot-like creature. It looks and acts exactly like a human being, and yet it is not human. A robotoid is alive in the biological sense, but it is an artificial life form. Robotoids respond to conventional routine medical tests in the same way as humans do. They eat, they drink, they breathe, they bleed if cut, and they can be killed. Robotoids can also think, but they think only in the sense that a computer thinks. Like any other computer, the brain of a robotoid has to be programmed for each assignment it is given. But unlike many electronic computers, the biological computer brain of a robotoid possesses an enormous memory. As a result, robotoids can be programmed to communicate and think in such complex patterns that they act human.
Now, that's not all. They do have some downsides. They take weeks to manufacture and can replicate a human genetic imprint. Now, the United States tried to experiment with this Robotoid technology by trying to take out a dissenter general, George Brown, who was taken into a CIA lab for Robotoid experimentation that went horribly wrong. Now, he couldn't be writing these without talking about the man who appointed him to the Import-Export Bank, a man by the name of John F. Kennedy. Now, he has a lot of assertions about Kennedy's untimely demise, namely that it went about by a device inside of the limousine and not the traditional narrative of Mr. Oswald, namely that Oswald was assassinated by a Mr. Ruby, who was then exterminated in prison, along with suppression of journalists around the fact, as even at the time he does not believe the magical bullet theory as we know it today, and instead believes that there was a group, namely the CIA, who were shooting from outside of the limousine to accomplish side objectives, namely taking out the Secretary of the Treasury as well as the Governor of Texas, who were the two people on Earth who understood true power in Nixon's view, and finally that they were in cahoots with Lyndon B. Johnson, who was at this time himself a Rockefeller puppet, to bring about the Nelson Rockefeller presidency. He also talks about the vast poisoning of Fort Knox with plutonium so that the vault could never be truly audited after this one last audit, and at his express request. As you need to remember, Dr. Peter Beater is not someone without power. He is someone who is chairing the Import-Export Bank as an attorney. He has legitimate power, and when he speaks, he has the ability to influence events that may come about. And he elaborates on how people can be reprogrammed with the use of electrodes, which is how the Rockefellers ousted Nixon, by creating a fully controlled, altered environment inside of the White House. This was after Nixon floated the dollar by severing its ties with U.S. gold. The Rockefellers illegally, in his words, acquired much of Fort Knox's gold to sacrifice New York City and the stock market to float the price of gold to over $2,000 an ounce when it was previously $4. This would make the Rockefellers insane amounts of money and would further their plan to turn the United States into a goods manufacturing facility to rule the world with the USSR. Now, he would also lay out multiple plans for a proposed World War III, one of which would be a nuclear war taking place in 1983. Actually, aside from that nuclear conflict, he lays out a plan for World War III, which I will let him tell you himself.
Plans now exist for the Americans in the Sinai to be attacked, and for over 100 of them to be killed, enraging Congress and public opinion in the United States. On top of that, the drumbeat which has begun with the United Nations Anti-Zionism Resolution will by then make it appear that Israel is in danger of extinction. War will thus be declared by then-President Rockefeller's rubber-stamped Congress. Cobra helicopter gunships have already been delivered secretly to the Sinai, and these will be equipped with air-to-ground tactical atomic missiles, which have been in the Sinai secretly for 2 years under strict American control. After hostilities break out, this limited nuclear strike force is to put the OPEC oil wells out of action with atomic blasts. No nation in the Middle East, including Israel and Lebanon, will escape radioactive fallout from this limited nuclear strike. And the oil wells themselves, due to radiation, will remain unusable and capped off for a period of approximately 10 years.
And he needs to tell us these things. Negligence would be to know about these things and not tell us that they are coming, which is why he has this compulsion to lay these things out so plainly so that even the common man can understand. He also asserts that there is a river underneath the entire world that the CIA wished to poison with plutonium. Now, this will not be an isolated incident, as it will be a running theme, as eventually they will switch from plutonium to a use of a super poison that even he does not know about. He is also against massive amounts of campaign spending, being outraged that someone would spend $4,000 on their campaign. He would also tackle the abilities that corporations are treated like individuals, but are not individuals. He would also say that these corporations are collaborating in a pseudo-socialist economy. Now, when he says socialist, I believe he means more of a command economy, but he uses the word socialism, so that's the word I will use. And with these corporations, Nelson Rockefeller in his presidency and his new constitution and his dictatorship will institute a total monopoly to control the entirety of the United States industry. Now, this monopoly, at the time of writing in 1972 to 73, is that the monopoly was close, but not yet totally achieved. Now, this would make you a total slave to the Rockefellers, even though you are now only a half slave. Dr. Beater also believes that the Rockefellers are responsible for the rise of a certain German dictator in the 1930s to the 1940s, and that is what they are doing with the current line of United States presidents, namely LBJ. As for a more generalist, going to another claim that I feel would be remiss if I left it out, would be that Jonestown was staged to camouflage a U.S. military operation to destroy a missile base in Guyana. Now, he shies away from the intellectual trap of blaming a certain group of people for everything, even though he will call them Zionists, which is a topical term nowadays, but he believes that the USSR has teamed up with these Zionists to achieve world control, along with the Rockefellers and an Asiatic axis, which he believes will be Russia, China, and Japan. However, even after the collapse of the USSR and the untimely demise of the Rockefellers, he believes that their influence echoes through the ages, and that this is the reason why economics are about to go off the rails. Now, as he began to descend into the pit that we would now know as his road to extermination, he would begin to sound off all of the conspiracy notes that you are used to if you are in the sphere of New World Order types, in the creation of a group, unnamed, but is meant to prevent the United States from mounting a deterrent against Soviet cosmospheres. Now, cosmospheres are space-based laser beam weapons which can destroy selected targets all over the world from outer space. These are also responsible for sonic disturbances when fired at low concentrations. Now, this threat even exists after the collapse of communism, and this effort to prevent the United States from developing these are set up by the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Trilateral Commission, and the Carnegie Endowment Fund. Now, this nuclear war in 1983 would be led by a Greater Asian Alliance mishandled by the United States, which is previously mentioned to be Russia, China, and Japan. Now, moving on to number 3, the modern applications of Peter Beater's thinking. Now, he predicted multiple things that we now struggle with today, or if not struggle with, now exist. Dr. Beater would predict the rise of stagflation in the United States. Now, you've heard of a lot of flations nowadays, and I know our wallets are stretched as ever. Greedflation, shrinkflation, all of those you will know now. But back in the 70s, and even into today, stagflation is important to understand. Stagflation is an economic concept where an economy stagnates and unemployment rises, but the stocks continue to rise, devaluing the dollar and making your buying power lesser. He would also predict the establishment of a European central bank, and I'll give him half a point on the China-Russia kinda economic alliance, minus Japan. Japan seems to be a staunch Western ally, at least at the moment, and the alliance of the Rockefeller family with the Morgans seems to have a lot more traction than most conspiracy theories of his day. Namely, his lasting predictions would come in the form of his book, The Conspiracy Against the Dollar. Being a staunch critic of Nixon's moves to sever the United States from the gold standard, which would allow printing of a fiat currency. Now, fiat currency is currency based on nothing but but trust, which is what our dollar is based on nowadays. He would also predict the rise of a corporate aristocracy, the rise of individual quote-unquote corporations that have staunch political footmen in the government. He also critiqued the Nixon-era policy of détente as a power grab for Nelson Rockefeller. He also critiqued the severing of the United States from the gold standard, as previously mentioned, to up the cost of gold. He would have a heart attack at how much gold costs today, sitting at over double his prediction. Now, in general, getting away from the specifics, Dr. Beater seems to critique the neoliberal economics and globalization of the world, and I will spare you some of the economic nitty-gritty, but he seems to have a Beater sense in distinguishing political camouflage that he so railed against from reality. Overall, Beater sees the corporate aristocracy as viewing the gold standard as an inhibitor to their success, as more money is better. It was the last inhibitor of their corporate ambitions, which is why he railed so hard to keep it. And if he could see our world today, I feel he would feel his predictions were justified outside of the more conspiratorial Robotoid Rockefeller dictatorship. However, going back to what I said at the beginning, a lot of our modern issues, I feel, would give him pause. The fact that he may have been more right than we gave him credit for. But the first step in stopping whatever madness faces us today is you, the American citizen. Although now I know that my reach is a lot wider than the United States, so I will tell you, if you are living in any country with a representative democracy, you need to realize that all of the dictators of old achieved everything they did by the negligence and complacency of the people. Citizens simply watched as dictators maneuver their way to power, and in many cases, they simply could not believe their eyes and preferred to hope out of blind optimism that things would not deteriorate completely. Those citizens under dictatorship would suffer horribly for failing to observe, to grasp the truth, and to act on their situation. So I tell you, if you are an American citizen, if you are a citizen of any country with a representative democracy, today I wish for you to call your representative, call your congressman, call your president if you have to. The only thing preventing the rise of these things that you detest is your complacency. Call your lawmakers and make yourself heard, because please, my friends, do not allow this tyranny to continue in America or any of the countries around the world. Until 2 weeks from now, this is Wyrmspeaker. Thank you, and may God bless each and every one of you. Oh man, the LARP was way too strong on that one. Holy mother of LARP. Anyway, I started out on this topic and I wasn't really inspired. I took way too long to make this, and the research portion of it, and I know I skipped over a lot of it. I didn't have time to adequately cover everything that I wanted to, and I kind of just had to cut my losses at some point, as he has a massive catalog of audio records. And I will tell you, I am not doing Dr. Beater justice on the fleshing out of his ideas, as he is surprisingly competent in telling you what he's about. So, if you do like political nitty-gritty stuff, especially economics, and you also have that conspiratorial tilt as I do, I would recommend going to Peter David Beater, all one word, all lowercase, .com. They have all of his audio letters in text or audio form. They have a bunch of miscellaneous references and basically connections to anything Dr. Peter Beater related. I would also recommend, purely if you are an economics person, that you get Conspiracy Against the Dollar. It is quite readable, although it's not cited very well, and it's mainly for the person who doesn't want to push themselves in thinking too much about where things come from. If you just want to take him at his word for it, it's a great read. So, in the spirit of Dr. Beater, I want you to call your congressman, or your representative, or anyone, and tell them how you truly feel about a social policy that you disagree with or agree with. Get politically involved. It's the least you could do to prevent the replacement of all of your loved ones by organic robotoids, and it is the first and best step that you can take to opposing the Rockefeller cartel even after they're all dead.